Alright, so I watched Supergirl the other day in the midst of the current online discourse surrounding the film. Does it suck? Is it a cinematic calamity? Has it just killed the DCU or whatever sensationalist nonsense? Is it one of the worst comic book movies of all time on the likes of Morbius? The short answer is absolutely not. This film is a really great time. But before we get into that, and just to introduce the film a bit, Supergirl is an adaptation of Tom King's Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow book, and is the next film of the current DCU, directed by Craig Gillespie and written by Anna Nogueira. Now don't get me wrong, this film definitely isn't perfect, but there is far more to like about this film than there is to not. I'll avoid spoilers, but the general synopsis of the film is that Kara, played by Millie Alcock, is sort of on something of a self-destructive path, constantly going on pub crawls, sleeping and waking up drunk, and lacking a direction. This mostly stems from, as we learn, from the fact that she doesn't really feel like she belongs anywhere. She doesn't feel the same love for Metropolis and Earth yet as Superman does, so she's still figuring her way. That is, until she comes across a girl named Ruthie, played by Eve Ridley. Ruthie's place in this story is as follows, that very early on into the film, her family is killed by the film's primary villain, Krem. Ruthie attempts to convince Kara to help her gain revenge, but Kara is hesitant and doesn't want to. The only reason then that the two do form as a pair is that in a confrontation, Krem manages to shoot Krypto with a poison that Kara then needs to get an antidote for, and said antidote is on Krem's person, so Ruthie kind of just tags along as their goals somewhat align. And that's the setup for the film. It's a fairly simple plot, but it's one that works for what the film is trying to say. I'll start the film off with some negatives, because there's a lot less to go through, to be honest. So for one, there were a few, I like to call them sort of MCU-isms, mostly at the beginning of the film. This part is sort of difficult to explain what I mean, but I really kind of dislike dialogue and humour that feels almost like fourth wall breaking. Like the characters themselves know they're in a movie and then trying to get a laugh out of the audience. I'm sure this didn't start in the MCU, but it is certainly prevalent throughout the whole of the MCU, and it just comes across to me as a little bit unnatural and a bit slapstick. As an example, in this film, at the beginning, Kara is in a system where there's a red sun, so she doesn't have her full powers. She gets into a fight and is sort of getting thrown around a bit, and in between getting beaten up, she's just sort of quipping and cracking jokes. And, you know, it's fine. It just, that kind of humour, it just never has really worked for me, but overall it's definitely like a more minor complaint, all things considered, as the tone of the film does get progressively much more serious. The other thing I'd mention is that the villain, Krem, wasn't all that interesting, layered, or nuanced. Krem is just sort of despicable in every way, and I think that works for what his role is meant to be, but he's not like a memorable part of the film, and I do think they could have maybe given him a little bit more screen time, or just fleshed him out a little bit more. Although I did hear that there was like supposedly a different cut of the film where he does feature more, so maybe that could have been better. I don't know. But then, you know, kind of what worked for me for the film was everything else. Like, the most obvious are definitely the performances. Millie Alcock is just absolutely fantastic as Kara Zor-El. She's charming, she can be humorous, but she's also really sincere as his character. The film has several strong emotional beats that Millie just kills, and every time you really buy the emotion that she's attempting to portray. She's a really talented actress for sure. But not just her. Eve Ridley as Ruthie is great too. The two of them together have a great chemistry, and there's a satisfying narrative arc and development that the two of them go through together, and that they both really sell. And that kind of links to what surprised me about the film the most, and that is it's actually quite emotional. Well, I found it to be anyway. You know, the score is quite good as well. I think it's composed by the same one who did like Game of Thrones. But the score was just really well timed and well placed, and it really captured the atmosphere that that was needed for when the more emotional beats of the film were ongoing. And, you know, interestingly, the person that I watched it with, you know, we both said that, you know, there were kind of like a couple times where we both got like kind of teary-eyed. And that was purely just on the performances, purely on the dialogue, and purely on the score that accompanied it. And, you know, that's what surprised me the most. This movie has a lot of heart that is brought out by the strength of, those aforementioned things. The performances, the acting. It was all great. Another thing I really enjoyed were the set designs. I can't recall the exact names of the different planets they go to. The names do pop up once they go to each location. But there were some pretty cool sort of like grimy underworld type of environments that were fun to see, and they feel like suitably sci-fi. It made the film feel like a proper sci-fi film. And the other thing that was really, really great was the action. The fight scenes and choreography were a lot of fun. They were punchy, they were creative, and it was fun how just seeing how Supergirl fought comparatively to how Superman does in his 2025 release. I'm not too clued in on much of the criticism online outside of the weird, incel community insisting that the actress isn't attractive. While no doubt those spouting, nonsense that Millie Alcock is somehow ugly probably look no better than my big toe. But I have seen some people take an issue with the fact that there are some deviations from the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow original story. Probably about the only thing accepted as pretty good written by Tom King. I haven't read the original comic, to be clear, but I think it was pretty obvious that this wasn't going to be a direct translation of comic to screen. For starters, it's an adaptation into the DCU, and they have no obligation but to take anything but what they want to from the original story. I understand critiquing the film and suggesting that the original work portrayed some aspects of the story better, but criticizing it solely for changing things I think is just silly. Just from the fact that Lobo's in the film should have been obvious that it wasn't a direct one-to-one and that there would be differences according to the story that they were wanting to put into the DCU. In conclusion, the film is a really good time. It's not perfect. I don't think it's as good as the Superman film, but despite its seemingly lackluster performance at the box office, I would personally consider it a good film and addition to the DCU. It's fun, and if you drown out what the critics are saying, and the cultural war discourse surrounding it, it seems most people who've seen it would agree. It's not a profound sci-fi film, it won't change your life, but it sure has much more of much more to say and more of an emotional arc than most of the MCU films. So I would give it a 7 to 7.5 out of 10. Definitely recommend.